The question, is anti-Semitism being represented adequately under the banner of critical race theory? Well, speaking with us tonight is Ziporah Reich. She serves as Director for Litigation for the Lawfare Project, a global network of legal professionals that focuses on anti-Semitism, defending the civil and human rights of the Jewish people, and fighting discrimination wherever they see it. Ziporah has an extensive background in law, including complex commercial litigation, mediating multi-party agreements, and has appeared before various government agencies for administrative hearings. She has now turned her attention to her true passion, civil rights litigation. Also throughout her career, Ziporah has volunteered many hours assisting battered women and negotiating agreements in housing court on behalf of low-income tenants facing eviction. Ziporah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone for joining. So as Christine said, I'm a Jewish civil rights attorney, and so I'm going to focus tonight on critical race theory and its interaction with anti-Semitism. So in my work, typically, Jewish people who believe that their civil rights have been violated because they are Jewish present their situation to me. I evaluate the situation, and if I believe there's a legal cause of action, I take it on behalf of the person. But in addition to that, I also keep an eye on emerging movements, situations, attitudes, bills that groups are trying to push into law. And I do that because it's important that I identify potential hotbeds for anti-Semitism that can, even if they're not anti-Semitic in the moment, can very quickly turn anti-Semitic. And critical race theory, as soon as it came on the scene, is one of those movements that I immediately realized I needed to keep an eye on. And what I want to do tonight is I'd like to talk about why that is the case and what you can do if you find yourself a victim as a result of the way critical race theory is being taught. So unfortunately, history has demonstrated again and again that very often when there are marginalized people who are seeking to enforce their rights, whether it's based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or anything else, valid rights, of course, at least some of the people in the marginalized group begin either casting Jews as the ultimate oppressor, or at the very least, they single them out as an ethnicity worth mentioning when they don't single out any other ethnicity. And the reason that happens is simple. When people feel victimized or marginalized, they look for a target to blame. And they look for a target that will actually get hurt when they attack it. Otherwise, it doesn't feel good. Picture a person who's aggrieved for any reason. They're very angry, they feel hurt, they feel like, somebody did something to them. They're not going to take a ball and with all their might bounce the ball. Nothing's going to happen to the ball. They're going to take dishes made of glass and throw them to the ground to see them smash. And the reason they do that, like I said, is because it feels good to them. They're angry, they want to see destruction. And unfortunately, the same thing applies when it comes to Jewish people and these marginalized groups that are trying to enforce their right. There are some that are so angry, they want to target people where they know if they target them, they will really, really be hurt. So if you have a group of people that are trying to enforce their civil rights as a minority group, for them to say the whole Canada is racist, the whole America is racist, how much damage does that really do? But when they start saying Jews are racist, they're the problem for us, things start happening very quickly that devastate Jewish people. There are attacks that start happening, kids start getting bullied in school, and unfortunately, a lot of these people feel very good about it. And that is why they target Jewish people. A second reason for that is because when you choose a target, the target has to be a target that's socially acceptable. It's a socially acceptable target. So for example, going back to the example of the man who was very personally offended by something and very upset, he may want to break somebody's bones. He's not going to do that. That's not socially acceptable. What he will do is break dishes. Again, that is socially acceptable. Same thing when it comes to Jewish people. It's socially acceptable to be anti-Semitic. And so they are the perfect target for some of the people in these marginalized groups who have valid claims or valid rights to enforce, but yet they focus their attention, unfortunately, on Jewish people being the oppressors rather than looking at solutions. So with regard to critical race theory, we don't have to look very far to see how it can become very anti-Semitic very quickly. And as an American, I'm going to look at an American example where in California, Governor Newsom in 2021 signed into law a requirement that all students take at least one ethnic studies class in order to graduate high school. That sounds like a noble idea, right? But unfortunately, it was called the ethnic studies curriculum. Actually, it was called the ethnic studies curriculum, but it was based on the critical ethnic studies curriculum, which is very rooted in critical race theory type thinking. And so the State Board of Education in California hired a group of people to create an ethnic studies curriculum that they could offer to all the school districts so they could use that to fulfill their requirement. And lo and behold, the ethnic studies curriculum, literally called the ethnic studies model curriculum, was just rife with anti-Semitism. And of course, a lot of Jewish groups complained, a lot of non-Jewish groups complained. It was almost embarrassing. The California State Board of Education looked at it and said, you're right, this is very anti-Semitic. And they went ahead and sanitized it. But that was not the end of the story. The people that created that anti-Semitic curriculum that they were going to offer to all the school districts thought, oh no, we're not letting this anti-Semitism go. We are going to withdraw from this ethnic studies model curriculum, and we're going to create something called a liberal ethnic studies model curriculum. So not under the government's tutelage, just their own curriculum. And it was anti-Semitic. It is anti-Semitic on steroids. It's just shocking when you look up what they say on their website, and there's nobody to stop them. And sadly, lots and lots of districts in the United States, mainly in California, are accepting that liberated ethnic studies model curriculum over the one that the Department of Education is offering, because all they have to do is teach ethnic studies. They don't have to use a specific curriculum. So the question, and unfortunately, I understand it's probably a little more, maybe a little more prevalent in Canada, but fortunately for the US, a lot of the ethnic studies curriculums have not been started yet. So we don't know exactly just how bad it's going to be. But the question that I'm asked again and again, and this is appropriate for Canadians and Americans, is what can we do about it, right? Now, there are two actions you can potentially take. The first one is, let's say you have a child in a school. You know your child is going to be taught critical race theory. It's on the agenda, right? The first thing you want to do is look at any syllabi that have been given for the class. And you also want to look at the books. And if you can identify something in the syllabus that's blatantly anti-Semitic, or in the books that are blatantly anti-Semitic, you can then go to the Department of Education and raise that. But usually what you're going to see is anti-Semitism in the form of anti-Israel talk, such as, Israel's committing genocide. And in some states, or in Canada, it would be some provinces, there are laws that say that you cannot teach a pure untruth, for example. And so what you can do is you can look at your provinces or your state's laws and see whether or not there's something in the syllabus or in the book that directly contradicts what's allowed to be taught. And then you can, raise it with the Department of Education. However, if you don't see that and critical race theory, becomes a class that's being taught in the school, and then your child gets bullied, or you start seeing other children getting bullied, or anti-Semitic incidents start rising, you can then say that you believe that the uptick in anti-Semitism is happening because critical race theory is being taught. Now, that's not a very easy connection to always make, right? Because if there's an anti-Semitic incident, you say, I think it's because of critical race theory. They say, well, it was just an anti-Semitic incident and we want to deal with it in the way we normally deal with it. So what you can do as a parent is you can start looking for patterns in your school, patterns in your province, and patterns in the entire Canada, in the entire country. You can think to yourself, well, until 2022 or whatever year they actually implement critical race theory in the schools, there's only been one anti-Semitic or 5 anti-Semitic incidents over the past 5 years. Now there's 20 incidents, right? But sometimes in your particular school, there may not be all those anti-Semitic incidents, and maybe it's more a province-wide or a country-wide uptick in anti-Semitism as a result of critical race theory, right? But the question I always get is, well, how do I know what's going on in every school? I mean, that doesn't give me a good way to attack this. And then I say, well, luckily for both Americans and Canadians, we both have systems by which we can request information. You have the right to go to the Canadian schools, whether your child is in the school or not in the school. You can go to every school if you want, through the access to information law, which allows you to do what they call an access to information request. And in the US, it's called a Freedom of Information Act request. And you can say, I want to know for the past 10 years, every single anti-Semitic incident recorded in this school, this school, this school. You can go to every single school and ask for that. Then you can look at the data and you tell yourself, well, I see that from 2010 to 2020, there in the entire province, there have been 10 incidents. Now there's 50 incidents. In that case, it's not just you're literally establishing a potential causation, and that is usually enough to bring a legal action. So you would consult an attorney, or you can come to our organization. We're the Lawfare Project. Actually, we deal not just in the US, even though I'm a licensed US attorney, we deal with situations all over the world. We partner with attorneys in other countries. We do it on a pro bono basis. And of course, we're happy to help. So if that ever becomes a situation for you, know that there is help out there. You don't have to be quiet, and you should really raise the issue, because even if your child is not being hurt right now, your child may be the next one that's hurt, or other children may be hurt in school as a result of it. And by the way, this is not just for children, it's also for teachers in school. Teachers can be maligned, although my focus right now is on children, but they can be fired. And if you start seeing, again, if you're a teacher in a school and you start seeing Jewish person after Jewish person being fired, start looking at what the numbers are, what they were before critical race theory, what they are now. And if it turns out they're a lot greater, that gives you good grounds to at least talk to an attorney and see what your rights are. The one last thing I want to conclude with, and I know that Richard mentioned it, but it's so important that I want to say this again. It really, really bothers me that Jewish people are always put in the position where they have to fight against these, organizations that actually are trying to enforce, their rights, and their legitimate rights. And then people start conflating our objection to calling us the optimal oppressors, right? They conflate that with our anger that they're pursuing their rights. And of course, that's not true. In fact, Jewish people have been historically, very pro-civil rights. So I am absolutely advising everybody that when you talk about critical race theory, for example, or any one of the movements, even if it's Black Lives Matter, you want to make sure to tell people, I am not against Black rights. I am not against what many people in the Black Lives Matter movement want. In fact, I am standing shoulder to shoulder with you to fight that. What I am against is that I'm being a casualty as a result of that. I'm being demonized for some reason, through no fault of my own. And that's what I'm objecting to. So if you can do that, you always keep yourself in a place where people can't start attacking you for being a racist or whatever else they're advocating for. So I think that's about it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will turn it back to you, Christine.